Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we like to dig a little bit deeper and get to the heart of issues facing our society. Anyway, what I promised a couple weeks ago when I did a show on the sexual revolution that I would go into more detail about how our basic instincts, so to speak, are used against us by those who know how to exercise power. And what I mean by exercise power is how to exercise psychology on the masses, which most people are really quite unaware of how it really does work. So, before I go on here, and I promise you this is going to be very informative, something you will not want to miss. I would encourage people to check out my website, and that's linked in the comments section, since I guess we can't use annotations anymore on YouTube. And it's also subscribe to my channel so that you can keep aware of and abreast of new videos and shows that are put up. So anyway, what I would like to deal with first and foremost is just a brief description of the science fiction novel that I turned out recently, and it's called The Destiny of Our Past. Now, in it, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are actually employed by the society in order to control the people. Unlike dystopian novels such as 1984, for instance, it's not one in which the government uses poverty and despair to control the masses. Oh, on the contrary, it uses affluence to control the masses. It uses religion, or lack of, to control the masses. Of course, I'd have to explain that the ruling elite, they are quite spiritual, whereas they want to destroy religion amongst the common people in their society because they feel it's an easier way to control them. I'll get into a little bit more of that later. And it is a science fiction book set during a 3-month period running up to the Great Flood, or, what some people call Noah's Flood. And yes, it is science fiction. And, you could look at some of these books in the Apocrypha, and you'll see that the description of society doesn't seem to be one that fits the idea of these movies that show that era or period being one where, everyone's a farmer or something. If you're mixing species to create new species and you're using techniques to do it that are not magical, then obviously there's some biotechnology going on. But anyway, that's enough of the book. If you want to learn more, just go to Amazon, The Destiny of Our Past. Now, going on to that other dystopian book that I mentioned, though, 1984, which, I've heard that it's becoming more popular out there. I wonder why that is. Maybe the collective psyche, a lot of people are really realizing that maybe there's some people have decided to use 1984 as a training manual rather than a warning on where society can go. But opposite of my novel, in which sex and sexuality are broken up in such a way that it is used to a large degree just to keep people pacified, because they're either using virtual reality or they're hooking up indiscriminately to a large degree. The 1984 presents a very bleak society in which such things as family are looked upon as a place where your children can turn you in for being against the government. Relationships, no one really knows who is working for Big Brother and who isn't. And it's kind of a asexual, it seems that the society is going asexual in the sense that you have announcements made, for instance, at least in the movie version, where there's this praise of people that are abstaining from sexual practices. Of course, I guess then we would be thinking that the women would have children through artificial insemination. But again, that would be breaking down the family unit. You see, the family unit is one of those things that is, well, it's dangerous to a society that wants to maintain control. And what I mean by control is that kind of totalitarian control, that you control the mind, not just the actions. An authoritarian government can threaten to throw you in jail or beat you up or any number of things to make you comply with whatever the laws or norms of that society are. Totalitarian, on the other hand, refers to the idea that that's not enough. You've got to get people to think a certain way, to act a certain way, to only speak a certain way. Wow, that sounds like a lot of things going on in today's society with political correctness. We'll get to that too. Now, the family unit, I know I've read up on cults, and some of these cults would actually discourage people from getting married and reproducing. In fact, some of the more modern ones even will not allow the person to reproduce. You have to submit to being sterilized. And it's not so much that they're ecological and just thinking, oh, well, man, humans are this virus on the face of the earth that has to go away. No, that's not the idea. The idea is that the family unit, if you have one, a husband is going to be more loyal to his wife, or a wife to her husband, or either to their children, than any form of loyalty to government. Okay? If you have a choice between being loyal to the government and being loyal to your family, the average sane thinking person will be loyal to their family. And this then is seen as a threat to authoritarian regimes. And so, therefore, you have to undermine the family. Now, you're probably thinking, well, which authoritarian regimes? You're thinking Mussolini or, all these kinds of entities. But I'm saying more of the kind of systems that we're seeing developing, more of the scientific, technocratic way of thinking, in which you get compliance to the norms without having to go out and beat people up. And one of the things I would point out is that many of the Western societies today, I'm not going to say it's conspiracy, but I'm not going to say it's not a conspiracy of some sorts. It could just be a certain type of person has come to the top in reference to their views and values and so forth, and they just see that they see that other people get put in good positions that share those kinds of ideas and ideologies. But now let's take a look at what's going on in today's society. We see a minimization of the importance of family. We see our entertainment in which it seems that if there are families presented, the family is presented as dysfunctional. It's not something you really would want to be in. Marriage, often, if you compare it to maybe the way marriages were shown 30 years ago, you don't see that closeness. Even in comedies 30 years ago, like an All in the Family and something like that. That might be more like 40 years ago, but a show like All in the Family, at least the couples that were presented were, loving. They may disagree with each other, but they were loving. And the ones you see now, it just seems to be more of a, I don't know, it's kind of an antagonism that you see in the relationships presented. Maybe this is one of the reasons why young people are shunning marriage right now, is because they've grown up with these kinds of images of what marriage and family is, and it's certainly not presented as a really wonderful alternative. But that works to the favor of the state. It actually works for corporations too, because the state is able to control people easier. If people aren't getting married and having families, then they're more like work units, and You don't have to spend money on such things as daycare or schools. If you've got double income, no kids, or they're just single, then it works well with corporations, because that means the people have more discretionary disposable income in which they can buy all kinds of goodies that you come out with and say, hey, you need to have this, because if you don't have this, you're not trendy. Okay? So think about that, though. Think about that. You're sacrificing the joys and beauties of family, the ability to pass your legacy on for toys. I mean, come on. That's like in the Bible where you have Jacob and Esau sells his birthright out for a bowl of soup. That's, kind of the same thing. Okay, trading something wonderful for something that's not nearly as meaningful overall. And so ultimately, though, it still works really well in a consumer society. Now, of course, that consumer society cannot maintain itself. It's like a drug addict who, to get that high, it might mean eventually they're going to die. But that's just the nature of the social psychology we see in our societies today. Now, the other thing you want to get rid of is religion. And again, it's not so much an intellectual thing. Religion is attacked, and you wonder why all of a sudden, I've noticed this about 5-6 years ago, you started seeing this huge amount of negativity towards religion being rolled out in social media. Again, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm not saying it's not. But ultimately, religion gives an advantage to a people, and that is it gives them another framework to look at besides whatever the government says. Religion allows you to say, wait a minute, I don't agree with this. I will live and do and think differently than whatever the society says. And that could be seen as very negative. Now, you can look at the case where Jews throughout the history of many societies, but if you look at Europe 500-600 years ago, Jews were looked down upon not so much for their religion, even though they had a different religion than the prevailing Christian religion in Europe. They also were outsiders. They tended to stick within their own traditions. They didn't just give up their traditions and assimilate. And many people saw that as a threat, that they weren't going along, they weren't conforming. And in human nature, there is a tribal sense that those who don't conform are not part of the group. They're looked at a little differently. Now, you could say the same thing for groups like Mormons today. You can look at this, in essentially any religious minority within a population is seen in some ways as being outsiders. And so people, they have that finger to their chin and giving that little nod like, I wonder what, and then you get all these conspiracy theories out there, that, most of them are totally ridiculous, but, they still come out there, and then people go, yeah, I'm not sure what those people are doing. And so, sometimes people fill in the blanks instead. But religion, like with the Pope in Poland, Pope John, I believe it was, when I may be wrong about that. Anyway, I was just the idea is though that during the 1980s, the Pope as Paul. Anyway, it was one of the apostle names. Anyway, he was negative to communism, and he rallied the Polish people. And this was what started the Soviet Union really starting to collapse once people started showing civil disobedience in a major Eastern European country. And then it just, the dominoes just fell, and communism would fall because of that. If there had been no Pope from Poland, if the Poles had given up on their Catholicism, chances are communism would have stayed around much longer. Romania, it was also a situation that people's religious views unified them when they went up against communism. So religion can play a very, very strong influence on people, and therefore often states, even if they agree with the religion, even if you have a state religion, will tend to be weary of that power and will try to rein it in. That's why kings used to always want to have a say in what archbishops and bishops were chosen, because they were worried that someone could come along and question their lifestyles. Ethnic identity, very important, because if you feel that you have your own culture, it doesn't necessarily mean race, but ethnic identity can mean, Irish American or Italian American or Mexican American. And it gives you a certain sense of who you are and where you came from. And so therefore, again, it chips away at that, let's make everyone the same. And of course, that sameness can lead to the ability to be able to control people more from the government level. Now, there's another aspect to all of these that I would like people to consider. And if you can make a person into the ideal citizen, one who is no longer really connected to family that strongly, they have shunned religion, they have shunned any kind of ethnic identity they have, they've become this individual. And I don't mean individual in the sense of the free thinker, the kind of Missourian type person, the show me state, you got to prove something to me. No, I mean the individual as in a fragmented, autonomous unit. And if they are that way, they are far easier to control because you no longer have any social frameworks that will work to make them question the society. And furthermore, without these kinds of foundations, that means they're more likely to be led by emotional appeal. Because no longer will they say, well, wait a minute, my religion says this, or wait a minute, I was raised this way, or wait a minute. They instead can be swayed by very powerful psychological campaigns to get them to kind of work against their own instincts and become part of the norm, become part of whatever is being promoted at the time. Somewhat of a groupthink, so to speak. The idea that when you're in the group, you let the group control you. And if the group is saying, well, this is the way things are because it's really important that this be the way things are, you're more likely to agree with it. All right? And this is very dangerous because I think more people have died in the last couple of centuries because of governments doing this than any religious wars or any kinds of other sorts of threats. But ultimately, we should resist these kinds of ideas that say, let's throw away our past. Let's throw away who or what we are and just become one. That doesn't work. That is not going to bring about a free-thinking democratic society. Because then you are subject more to emotional appeal to whoever holds the reins, whoever controls the media, whoever controls the government, whoever controls the education system. All right? Not saying, there's not good things that come out of education and government and so forth. I'm just saying that sometimes, power does get exercised. And it gets exercised in ways that are not necessarily conducive towards the individuality that people may want to pursue. Now, other things that we should consider in reference to this are, other things that we may want to consider is that people are conforming. by nature. I was reading a psychological study that was actually a series of studies that have been done on conformity. And our brains are hardwired to want to be part of the group. And this is tribal, and maybe it presented people the ability to be able to survive in the past. Okay, you didn't want everyone just kind of saying, "Hey, there's a threat coming," and everyone going, "Well, I'd rather not participate," and then that threat comes in and wipes you out. However, this conformity can be used to make sure that people are no longer able to essentially. This conformity can go against us. If our instincts and drives, if our thought patterns are turned against us by a omnipresent media, and I will actually say social media as well, then we could create a situation in which people will work against their own interest. And now think about this for a while. Conformity has been used throughout the culture. I mean, the military, we have uniforms. Uniform means everyone being uniform, everyone going with the crowd. Again, in a warlike situation, it might work well, but not in a society situation in which we want to maintain democracy, we want to maintain freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and so forth. But this is actually being chipped away at sources all around us. We have, for instance, just the societal sources that would say, well, this is proper and this isn't proper. But then also we have governments. I wonder this. Now here I'm going to throw in something that I'm wondering, about conspiracy here. Now, we have all of these things coming along about, political correctness. We have speech codes. We have all these things all of a sudden showing up all over the United States and much of the Western world, in which people are starting to become afraid to say how they feel about things. Now, the danger I see here goes beyond just the idea of being scared of saying things. It becomes the fear that people are going to stop also thinking things, because they're going to get an idea of this is how a proper human being is supposed to think, feel, and react in a situation. And if we start teaching this to our young people, then it will become part of the norms once they wind up in their 20s, 30s, and 40s and start assuming positions of influence in the society. And if it continues to get stronger and stronger and stronger in these institutions, then you may wind up with a situation in which people, they don't necessarily want to rebel, because the idea is if you say something that could be offensive to someone, well, then that is hurtful. Remember, we go back to emotion. Emotions being used to sell something. And therefore, you may have a situation in which freedom of speech and other freedoms as well just are not important anymore. I've seen polls that have shown that a lot of people on college campuses today, if they're asked, what's more important, freedom of speech or someone not getting their feelings hurt? And they'll say, someone not getting their feelings hurt. And again, this has been really pushed not from any rational sense, but it has been pushed emotionally. We have to do this because we don't want to be mean. Okay? Most people don't want to be mean. They don't want to hurt someone's feelings. But if you're, but it goes to the point where pretty soon it's like someone says, oh, I support, the Republicans. And then someone starts crying and saying, this is wrong. How could you be a Republican? Republicans do this and this and this. And it may not even be true, but it's what they believe. And therefore, it hurts their feelings if you say you're a Republican. So therefore, we need to ban Republicans. Okay? That is not too far-fetched because it's happening. Okay? It's really happening. To where there are people justifying these kinds of things in order not to hurt people's feelings. Now, at the same time, as people start going insular, because maybe they're afraid of, offending someone, so they don't socialize as much, they're afraid of getting into relationships because they're afraid of all the negative consequences that can happen from it. They don't want to take challenges anymore. They're scared. So they become insular. And they start doing things like substituting porn for togetherness, substituting games for real challenges, substituting network news for real information. We're becoming a substitute culture. Well, we substitute goods for true meaning in life. This is, I guess, the ultimate expression of consumerism. But all things that you get that are wonderful require effort. But we're teaching people not to expend effort. If it means you're going to hurt, it's going to hurt, or you're going to sweat, then there's no reason to go running, because you're beautiful anyway, and people should accept you for who you are. And therefore, our PE courses in America have turned into, hey, how much do you appreciate physical education? You kind of walked a little bit around the track. Let's go ahead and give you a good grade, okay? Or let's substitute things. Anyway, as I was saying, I mean, if we teach young people that the easiest way out is to go ahead and not do something, if the easiest way to confront something that may be controversial is to silence the person who's doing or saying something controversial, then what we wind up with is a society in which nothing gets expended. Our bodies, maybe we're looking at our bodies as being controversial or whatever. We're trying to say that health, the things like exercise and things like this are they're being pushed in order to make us conform to a certain body ideal. Well, if this kind of gets into people's minds, exercise is difficult. Exercise is hard. So if you have a situation in which someone's not really wanting to do something, then they can fall back on that, and therefore they will get out of shape. And this will harm them in the future. Biology is biology, regardless of what our feelings are, okay? Biology is biology. It does not matter. And then you get into such things as, we maybe part of this whole thing with trying to make everyone safe. When you're 2 and 3 years old, well, we can't have playgrounds because you could get hurt. Or we have to put Nerf stuff around so you don't fall and hurt yourself. We have to make sure that whenever a kid is outside and playing, that they have adult supervision, which means that kids, when they're 4 and 5, can't even be out in their backyard and have some time to think and just look at a bird or look at the clouds without mom or dad or someone staring out at them to make sure they're not getting hurt, or heaven forbid, they might get bitten by an ant or something. This is creating a weak culture and weak individuals. And then those individuals will have a very hard time forming any kind of social attachments. Because, like I said, it's difficult to be able to connect to someone when you're unable to really even be on good terms with your own individual challenges. Anyway, so basically I feel that today's society, and I think some of it is just things that have happened. I think some of it is actually planned. I mean, you can look up the psychology of social control, and you can find lots of information on how things are actually done behind the scenes to affect us. Things have grown a lot since the days of Edward Bernays and the creation of the public relations industry. And so what we need to do is we need to be cognizant of this and realize that who we are is being manipulated by those who want to make us someone different. And they're usually using our own sense of values, our own instincts, and our own emotions to get us to behave the way they want us to behave.